Hello, my friends, and welcome to the second part of our math lesson for today. Again, we're doing lesson 7.10, which is practicing telling time. And the essential question is, what are the different ways you can tell and read the time on a clock? So not only are we looking at the differences between telling time on the digital clock and the regular clock, but we're also learning different ways to tell the time. We can say exactly what the time is, but there are some other different terms that we can also use to tell the time. So I'm just going to give you a little more examples, and I'm also going to be able to show you kind of why we say certain things like quarter past a certain time or half past a certain time. It's going to look a lot. I'm going to be able to show you, and you're going to be able to understand it a little bit better because I'll be able to kind of partition the clock in some ways on the Smart Notebook. So let's get right into it. So the first one says, I guess it's just kind of like a little warm up. It has us labeling the clock with people's names, so I think there might have been like another question that we had to look at before this, but for this activity we're just going to look at each clock and see what time it is showing, and then we're going to write that time in the digital clock. So first off, we see that on this one the hour hand is pointing in between the 11 and 12, not quite at the 12 yet, but almost there. And then we see the minute hand pointing to the 9. So we know that our hour is going to be 11, so we can type that part in now. And then we're going to count by fives all the way to the 9 for our minutes. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. So we know that this clock is showing 11:45. Okay, and we kind of practiced this in our last lesson too. So should be hopefully kind of like a review and kind of like a warm up for you. So this next one is showing the hour hand in between the 3 and the 4. So we know that the hour is going to be 3. And then we're going to count by fives to see how many minutes past 3 o'clock there have been. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So we know that this time is showing 3:25. And then the last one, our hour hand is kind of pointing right on the 7, just a little bit off of it, but pretty much pointing right at the 7. And then the minutes hand is pointing at the 3. So let's count by fives to the 3. 5, 10, 15. So this clock is showing 7:15. Okay, so that should be kind of like a review for you guys because we did that in our last math lesson, but it's always good to continue to practice it because some people forget to count by fives when they're counting the minutes. So that's just always a good practice to do. So our next slide is showing us different ways to write and say the time. So let's look at this clock for a second. The hour hand is pointing to the 8 and the long minute hand is pointing to the 3. So we know based on being able to tell time on a clock that this clock is showing 8:15 because that hour hand is pointing to the 8 and the minute hand is pointing to the 3, which shows 5, 10, 15 minutes past 8. Right? So we know that both clocks are showing 8:15. Another way to say 8:15 is 15 minutes after 8 because again, 15 minutes have now passed since it was 8 o'clock. Now this is the part that I wanted to show you guys a little bit more in depth. So another way to say 8:15 or 15 minutes after 8 is quarter past 8. And the reason why, remember, I was talking about how it's very similar to fractions. So if I were to partition up my clock, let's just draw some lines here and partition it up. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line going from the 12 to the 6, and then I'm going to draw another line from the 9 to the 3, kind of divided up into fourths. Okay, so now my clock is divided up into fourths. If my minute hand is pointing right on the 3, then that means that all of this time right here, I'm just going to color it in real quickly. All this time has passed, right? And so remember when we did fractions, when we divide something up into fourths and one of those fourths is shaded, we can say 1/4 of the object is green, or we could also say 1/4 of the object is green, right? Because remember, the other thing I told you too that you can kind of relate it to is money. You need 1, 2, 3, 4 fourths to make a whole. Or in money, you need 4/4 to make $1. The $1 being the whole, and the fourths would be the quarters, right? So you can also think of time sometimes as fractions and money. That's kind of why we put money and time together in the same chapter for math, is because sometimes you can relate your counting money skills to also be able to tell the time. So 8:15. So that's just another way you could think about it. If you were to partition the clock into fourths, when that minute hand is on the 3, that means that 1/4 of the whole clock has already passed. Okay, so sometimes you can say 8:15. And we'll learn about another saying when they put the minute hand on the 9. You can also, when that happens, you can say 1/4 till the next hour. But we're not really going to talk about that one right now. We're going to talk more about that in the future lessons. But just know that 8:15, 6:15, 7:15, whatever the hour is, whenever that minute hand is on the 15, you can also say 8:15. Same with the one over here. So we see that this clock is showing 8:30 because the hour hand is pointing in between the 8 and 9, and the minute hand is pointing at the 6, which means 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes have passed. And so what you can say too is you can also say 30 minutes after 8, and you can also say 8:30, because again, if you were to partition your clock into fourths, and that minute hand, the big hand, is on the 6, then that means that all of this time has passed already. So once that hand hits the 6, all of this time right here has passed. So half of the clock has now passed, or half of that time has passed. So you can also say 8:30. So whenever that middle hand or that minute hand is on the 6, you can say 8:30 the hour. Whenever that minute hand is on the 3, you can say 8:15 that hour. Kind of tricky, but hopefully that was a little bit easier for you to understand, showing you how it could be very similar to fractions. Okay? So let's draw the minute hand to show the time and then write the time. So we're going to draw the minute hand and then we're going to write the time on the digital clock. So this one says 15 minutes after 1. So remember, 15 minutes. If I wanted to find 15 minutes on the clock, I can just count by 5s for each number. So 5, 10, 15. So I know that my minute hand is going to be pointing right at that 3. So I'm going to draw my minute hand. Okay? And so now we know that our time is 1:15. So that's what this would look like. 1:15. Okay? 9:30. So 9:30, remember, I want to make sure that my clock is almost like it's partitioned into a half, right? And so if I draw my minute hand down to the 6, then that means that all of this time, half of the circle or half of the clock has already gone by. So now what I can do is I can count my minutes. I already know that the hour is 9, so let's count our minutes. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So I know that this time is 9:30. And then 5:15. So remember, 5:15, I want to almost partition my clock into fourths, and I want to show 1/4 like I did here, right? So I'm going to put that minute hand on the 3, and then, so 5:15. So we know that the hour is 5 because the hour hand is in between the 5 and the 6, and then we're just going to count our minutes. So 5, 10, 15. So I know that this clock is showing 5:15. So again, 1/4, the minute hand is always going to be on the 3. 1/2, the minute hand is always going to be on the 6. That's just something that you can maybe keep in the back of your head for when you're working with time. Okay? All right, we'll do a couple more examples just like the ones we did. So 10:15. So I know that quarter past means that the minute hand is going to be on the 3. So I'm going to just make my minute hand on the 3. And now I can count my minutes. So I know that the hour is 10, and I'm going to count my minutes. 5, 10, 15. So I know that this time is 10:15. 40 minutes after 3. Now this is a tricky one. They're trying to throw you off. So 40 minutes after 3. So to find out where 40 minutes would be, I need to count the minutes on my clock. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So my minute hand is going to be pointing right on that 8, just like that. Okay? And now, so remember, it's 40 minutes after 3, not 30, so we wouldn't say half past 3, and we wouldn't say a quarter past 3 because that minute hand's not pointing on 3. So the only way we can say this is by the actual time or 40 minutes after 3. So in this case, this clock we know is showing 3:40 because it's 40 minutes past the 3 o'clock hour. Okay? And then 7:30 is the last one. So I know that half past means that the minute hand is going to be pointing to the 6. So there we go right there. And then let's count our minutes. So we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. My hour hand is pointing in between the 7, so I know that this time is showing 7:30. Okay? All right, just a couple more examples. So this one was kind of similar to the one that we did on the other video. Lily eats lunch at 12:15. Meg eats lunch at 12:30. Katie eats lunch at 12:15. Which girls eat lunch at the same time? So we have 12:30 for Meg, and Katie eats at 12:15. So those two don't eat together. So Lily eats lunch at 12:15. So remember, quarter past means that the minute hand is going to be on the 3. And when we count our minutes by 5s, 5, 10, 15, we know that Lily now has eaten lunch at 12:15. So the answer to this question would be Lily and Katie. Just kind of like how it was in the last video, but they just gave you different times. Okay? All right, and let's answer our last question here. What time is shown on this clock? So our options are 4:30, 5:30, 6 minutes after 4, and 5:15. So we see that our hour hand is pointing in between the 5 and 4, so we know that the hour is 5. And then remember, whenever this minute hand is pointing to the 6, that can also, you can say 4:30, you can say 30 minutes past 4, or you can say half past 4. Okay? So in this case, option A is the correct answer. Because again, the clock is showing 4:30. So the hand is in between the 4 and 5, and then half of the clock has basically already happened. So that's why we call it 4:30. Okay, so I hope these videos were a little bit helpful. I know it's very tricky, and a lot of you are probably wondering, well, why don't we just say, 4:30, and have that be the only thing that we say? And the answer for that is I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure why there's so many different ways to tell the time, but just wanted to make you aware of different ways to tell time, so that way if somebody does say to you 4:30, you can also know, okay, that means 4:30. So it's just kind of a good helpful tool to know all of those different terms when you're telling time. Okay, everybody, so you can now go log on to Think Central and do your assignment for 7.10. Hopefully these videos were helpful, and good luck on your math work. Bye!